Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. I know everyone is very busy, and I really appreciate that everyone came out to hear what I have to say. And thank you very much, Chaim, for your gracious introduction. I appreciate that as well. Before we begin, I just want to show a quick, a little video, which is really telling, and I think everyone will find it a little bit, pretty interesting. So here we go.
Dag Fien. Ik zie een school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja.
Insecten. Oranje. Pas erop. Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de...
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
De vierde, daar zei ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Maison rouge, balcon blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
9-7. Last month you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh man. Dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
For our agenda, we have 3 items. First, we have the protection from government surveillance and what that means, what obligations the government has to keep our privacy private and to refrain from intruding on our privacy. Then we have commercial surveillance, what companies, data brokers, other commercial entities, and what their obligations are to keep our privacy. And then we have, okay, now that we have gone through what the government does and what commercial entities do, how can we protect ourselves? What can we put in place to protect our privacy online? Okay, so if we look back at what the president said as senator, he says, as president, he'll provide for our intelligence, our law enforcement agencies. What do they need to be able to track the terrorists, take them out? And then again, he always said, without undermining our Constitution, our freedoms, no more illegal wiretapping, whatever that means, of citizens, and that the government would not ignore laws when it's inconvenient. Now, all of these he has kept to this in reality, as we shall see. Let's take a look at what does the Constitution say and what do the amendments say. So number one is one of the roles of government is to provide for the common defense, to defend the country from external forces and from terrorists, from other countries that are attacking us. That is one of the primary, one of the many roles that the Constitution gave the federal government. In the Fourth Amendment, they write like this: the right of the people to secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizures shall not be violated. Now, this protects an individual from having his house searched for no particular reason without a justification. And this is the basis of them needing a warrant before they come in and do a search of someone's home or someone's property, before they can put a wiretap. All of those because there's a certain reasonable expectation of privacy, of private property, and that's what the Fourth Amendment gives us. So when we look at, providing for the common defense, now what is within the realm of the government's responsibility? Does this mean that the government is also responsible for defending cyberspace, the internet? And if so, is government monitoring of the internet a good thing because it's protecting the assets of the country and the assets of individuals in the country? Does it mean that they can track and record all cyber activities of every individual, all in the name of, well, we need to protect other individuals? So, like, where does that go, and how does that come about, and what do we consider, the protection of the country that is part of the mandate of the government? And then the question is this legal? Because ultimately, there's a certain amount of surveillance, and are there privacy issues that the Fourth Amendment protects? That this would be breaking. So you have this dichotomy, this sort of contradictory responsibility on behalf of the government. On one hand, they have to protect us. On the other hand, they can't invade our personal space. So there's a number of programs that the government actually has, in which they use various different surveillance techniques to protect the country. And we'll talk about each one individually over here. First, you have Einstein 3A. So originally it was Einstein 3, and then the A stands for accelerated because it went into production much earlier, actually close to 2 years before the planned date. And as they move on, more of the features, as the additional features become available, they implement it. Okay, and we'll get into exactly what Einstein is in a couple moments. We have the DIB. This is the Defense Industrial Base pilot, and we'll discuss that as well. And then there's another number of other monitoring programs. Okay, then how is the U.S. government monitoring itself governed by laws? So we are a country of laws, and the government itself can't just go and do surveillance. They are monitored by various different laws. And the key is really that it's limited by the Constitution. It's not totally prohibited. So number one is we have the Fourth Amendment. Then we have a couple of Supreme Court rulings. We have United States versus Miller and Smith versus Maryland. And then we have United States versus Jones, which is a more recent case. And if I remember correctly, that also happened here in Maryland. Okay, so Einstein 3A. This is based on a secret NSA program that was originally called tutelage, and they took that technology that was built for that secret program and applied it for a more public type of implementation. It's an intrusion prevention system as well as an exfiltration prevention system. And that's one of the new parts that added on the A. That exfiltration prevention system is that's part of the accelerated part. It was originally developed by the federal government, which began in 2013. It's used for protecting the federal cyber networks. So federal agencies are the ones that really use it for protection, and it runs on the commercial ISPs, Internet Service Providers. It's just outside the federal agency firewalls, and it uses a lookup system for known malicious code signatures, as well as probabilistic analysis for anomaly detection. Okay, and in English, what this means is you have a network, and a message comes in, let's say an email. Einstein captures it, compares it to a database of known attack signatures to see if there's any attachments or anything embedded that is known to be either a virus or some other subversive type of code. If it is, then it deletes it. If not, it lets it go on further if it thinks it's safe. And what happens with the probabilistic analysis is that it can look at it and can sort of say, does it match the type of code that would be malicious code? So it looks at what's the probability, and then it puts it into a sort of secured database where it can be checked and analyzed further. And if it is malicious code, well, then that becomes a new signature. And if it's not, then it can determine that, okay, this code is okay, and in the future, it allows it through to the recipient. So that's the way it protects. And actually, had this been in place by OPM, it would have prevented that entire breach because of the exfiltration prevention. So it looks at what data is going out and sees, is this a normal data flow? I don't have the exact details of how it works. That's not given out. But here's essentially a little diagram of what it works. You have a non-government sender, sends an email. Einstein captures it. It looks at the database of threat signatures. If so, if the malware is detected, it gets deleted. If it looks like an anomaly, that wait, this seems to fit the bill of something that's malicious, even though we don't have a pure signature for this particular one, it can quarantine it, and then they can look at, analyze that packet. If it's determined to be clean, and it sends the email to the government recipient into the agency. And that's basically the way it works. It sits outside the network, outside the federal agency's network. It's installed at the network provider, which is the ISP, the Internet Service Provider. And this way, anything coming in gets, before it hits the federal agency, that's where it gets. Now, some of those threat signatures come from a number of different sources. Some of them are top secret that are developed by DISA and the NSA, and some of them are from commercial entities such as Symantec and other such commercial companies that will sell those threat signatures to the government to use. The DIB pilot, or Defense Industrial Base Pilot, is another program which is specific for these defense contractors. It again with those defense agency, anything that comes from an defense department, etc., to those companies, or any other commercial communication from company to company. So this way it protects, because the defense contractors are so involved in top secret, etc. They require such protection, and here are some of the companies that get protected by this system. Then we go on. Here we have some of the details of that. It has a voluntary agreement from the defense contractor, so it's consent. Essentially, what they say is it's optional. If you want, you can join it. But if you don't join it, then you can't bid on federal, defense contracts. So it's sort of optional or voluntary. It's called voluntary, but essentially it isn't, because or else there's no way to do business with the Defense Department of Defense. And we have some safeguards in place. It's run by the ISPs. It's installed there, and there's no required feedback to the NSA. So that's some of the protections that on one hand, they're providing for this protection, which actually analyzes emails, but on the other hand, there's no feedback loop back to the NSA giving them the data and the content of those emails. So there is some sort of protection in place um, to prevent the federal government from actually reading those emails. Then we have a number of other programs such as PRISM, Headwater, Ocean, Shortsheet, and a whole long list of others. Anyone that would like to see some of the lists, and these were taken from the documents that were released by Edward Snowden, and we do know what some of these programs do in a very high-level fashion, but not necessarily the details of these programs. So that's why I left it as unknown, because we can't really determine precisely how they work. Okay, so what about constitutional protection of communications? Now that we know that the NSA has been collecting a huge amount of data, so there's all that. How can we do this? You know, the Constitution doesn't prevent it, but the question really is, well, what does the Constitution allow and not allow? Remember, it was written over 200 years ago. There was no internet, no email. So how could how can we compare it to what was available at that time, and how does that work? So what we really have to look at is, well, what was available? How about a letter? Look at a letter. You write a letter, you put it into an envelope, you seal the envelope, and you send it. So there's information that are outside on the envelope. Everyone can see that. And then there's information which is hidden, and that's the paper that's inside the sealed envelope. So we have the content of a message. This is the text of the letter. And then we have non-content portions of the message, which is like the to address, the zip code, the street address, and the name that the letter is being sent to. And then you have the return address, and you even have the amount of the postage stamp. So you have non-content portions of the letter, and you have content. So the non-content portions of the letter are not protected by the Fourth Amendment, because that's public. That's on the outside. And the right of the people to be secure is only in their persons, their houses, and papers and effects, is only, like it says, in their houses or in their private papers. But this is public because we want the mailman to be able to deliver it. If he can't see the address, then he can't deliver it. So that's not private information. And it's the same thing with an email packet. An email, you have non-content and content portions of an email. The non-content portions is the IP address, the to and from, and any other metadata, this is where the metadata term comes from, is on the outside of the packet so that the routers, the entire internet system, knows where to send that packet or that email. How does it get from point A to point B? And that's on the outside. We also have the title of the email. We have some of those external things which allow. So here's where some of the question comes up, is when we're doing these intrusion prevention systems, or are they really looking just at the external? If they have to analyze the code, they're already beginning to look at the internal text of the letter, text of the email. It's not necessarily text, but it could be in code as well. Okay, so here we have some of the key Supreme Court rulings that address privacy. And basically what happened, you had these two cases. You had United States versus Miller and Smith versus Maryland. In one of the cases, they were accused of money laundering, and in the other case, it had to do, I think, with drug running. So in one case, essentially they wanted to see the canceled checks. So the FBI or the investigators, they went to the bank and requested the checks, the canceled checks. And guess what? The bank gave it to them because there was no legal protection from financial data. They handed it over. And so you had Miller, who went to court on appeal. It went up to the Supreme Court saying that they don't have a right to. I have a reasonable expectation of privacy of my financial data, and they had no right without a warrant to request the canceled checks. Well, the Supreme Court said nope, not true. Once you give that check to the bank, or once you give it to someone else, the data on that check is now, you gave it away. It's called third-party doctrine. Essentially what it says is once you give information away to someone else, that's not private anymore. And we have a concept in legal terms called the gestational theory of privacy. Just like someone can't be a little pregnant, a little not pregnant, either you're pregnant or you're not pregnant, so too data is either private or it's not private. It can't be in between. So the check, once he gives it to someone else and that person cashes it, it's not considered private anymore. It's not private. It can't be a little bit private, that it's only private for this person and the bank. They're allowed to see it, but the government cannot see it. So that's really what happened there. That was what the Supreme Court. So Congress was absolutely outraged that the police or the FBI or any other investigator can just walk to a bank without a warrant and request records. And in response, they produced the Right to Financial Privacy Act, which prevents, it basically requires, it gives protection to any financial data that a person may have. And if investigators want to review financial records, either for a stock brokerage or a bank or any other type of financial transaction, they actually need a warrant. That's what was passed in response to the Miller ruling. Smith versus Maryland was a very similar case, but they went to the phone company and requested phone records. So they were able to now prove that, I guess, Smith made certain phone calls, and that's how they were able to prove that a crime was committed. United States versus Jones is a more recent case. Now, those first two cases, it comes down to third-party doctrine. That was really the bottom line, that once they communicate outside, just like the phone company, when you make a phone call, the phone company now has, by picking up that phone and dialing in the number, you're communicating the phone number to the phone company. So it's not private anymore because the phone company has that information now because you voluntarily gave it to them. So now United States versus Jones, what happened here is there was a drug trafficker, and the police pretty much knew that this person has to be the drug trafficker. But they couldn't prove it, nor could they find the source of the drugs. So what they did was very simple. They took a GPS tracker with a magnet, and they walked onto his driveway and stuck it to the car. Then every time he drove around, they didn't need someone following him. They just sat in their office and watched from a computer screen exactly where he was going. And as soon as he arrived somewhere, they were able to go there, photograph, check it out, and eventually they did indeed nail him. So now the question was, is this evidence sort of kosher, or is it invalid because they didn't have a warrant? So, but wait a second. If you look at it this way, if someone drives in the street, is that private information or is that public? It's public because he's driving in the street, on a public street. If he's driving in a public street, so what is the question? Why can't they take that data and analyze it? The fact that he was out in the street. That's not private. So in the ruling of United States versus Jones, the judge acknowledges that GPS didn't exist at the time of the United States versus Miller ruling or the Smith versus Maryland ruling. However, so it needs to be addressed. You know, it's once you collect that vast amount of data on a person, every single movement the person makes, perhaps that is in a category of its own, a bit different. So it acknowledges that in the ruling. However, he threw out the evidence for a different reason, because they went onto his property and installed the GPS tracker. And that was a violation of privacy because they went onto his property without a warrant, and that's what made them throw the evidence out. So while he evaded having to rule on the actual collection of the data in a public place, he was able to throw it out for a separate reason and get away from actually having to rule that difficult issue as to, you know, the vast amount of data that you collect based on a person's movements. Okay, so how are these doctrines that we've been talking about until now, the third-party doctrine, etc., how does that apply to the internet? So if we look at internet communications, we have a couple things. We have content portions of the message, and we have non-content portions of the message. When you think of an email, it's actually many broken up into many pieces, and those pieces get pushed out over the internet, and they arrive at the destination, and they get put back together again. So how do they get there? How do they make their way through the different routers, the different cables, the different systems that they have to touch to get from point A to point B? You have IP addresses, host names, and URLs. Those, you know, the address when you look at the top of a browser and it says www. whatever, that's a URL, and that actually is associated with an IP address, which is like a number, and those numbers are pointing to actual computer, which has a host name. It's a specific computer that it reaches. So you have this external information. So to direct where that message goes and, you know, who's supposed to receive it, that's external to the actual message, you know, to your actual email. That's what we call metadata. If you hear about that, you know, in the news in the past, that's that external data. It's data about what's being carried. It's not the actual data that you're sending, but it's, you know, similar to the address on an envelope, the outside of an envelope. That's not the actual content of your letter, but it gives the post office the destination. So too on an email, or if you want to go to a website, there's this external data which tells the various different systems, well, where does this request have to go to, or where does this message have to go to? So that's non-content portions of a message. That's the outside. So the question, so that's what they say that they're looking at in many of these cases. And that should be okay for the government to look at, because it's no different than the address on an envelope. Okay, it's not. You have no reasonable expectation of privacy. But the question then becomes, even that data, does that reveal information about the actual content of the message? For example, if I go to AA.org, which is, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous, if I was just sending a letter to them in an envelope, well, maybe it's a donation. It's a nonprofit organization. Maybe it's a donation. Nobody knows. But if I'm constantly going to, Alcoholics Anonymous, and I start chat sessions, and I'm at least logging in once a week, the collection of all that data together would perhaps indicate, or maybe not, that I have an alcoholism addiction. Would it indicate that I have an addiction? And that kind of information, the extrapolated information, is it fair for the government to be able to extrapolate that kind of information? And that comes up into the question. The other question becomes, Many times, for example, in the systems that we were, like Einstein, it's not the external part of the message that many times will contain the virus, malware, etc., that it, would be sending in. So it's not necessarily protecting from the actual external message or in metadata that's on a message, but rather the attachment, the message that's attached to the email. Well, so now you have a situation where the only way to protect the system is by looking through the message, the actual message. But do they have a right to look at that message? So the only way an anti-intrusion system can be effective is to look at the content of the communication. On the other hand, but wait a second, do they have a constitutional right to look at that data? So that's where some of the fogginess, the way the Constitution was written, these type of situations didn't exist, and that's where the question comes up. So how does one deal with that from a policy perspective, to a certain degree? So one of the things that the government has done is that they put disclosures and terms and conditions. You have to agree that any message that you're going to allow to traverse this government system can be looked at, can be surveilled, can be intercepted, can be seized, that kind of thing. And that's, so this way you have a choice. You can not log in, or you can log in. If you log in, you're agreeing to the terms and conditions. And that gives them that right to analyze the data, the actual messages and the information that you're pushing through the system. So now let's move on to more commercial surveillance. Just a little story. There was a fellow by the name of Bilal Ahmed, 33 years old, lived in Sydney, Australia, and he had a psychiatric issue. He suffered for many, many years with anxiety and depression. Now, given that his family comes from a very traditional Muslim background, he had found it, for some reason, I don't know anything about their culture per se, but he found it very difficult to discuss that condition and his treatment with his circle of friends and family. And, it would make it easier if he was able to discuss and get it out and have someone to discuss this with. So he joined a website called Patients Like Me to network with others that have similar conditions, similar psychiatric conditions, to discuss the symptoms, the treatments, share the experiences, and this way he would have that support that he wasn't able to get or didn't feel comfortable trying to get from his friends, his immediate circle of friends and family. So this was a great outlet for him and helped him tremendously. And if I actually went onto the website to see what it's like, and here's the first page, has many, 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 many conditions and support groups, forums where people can discuss treatment, discuss medication, side effects, all kinds of things. Really interesting website. So he found it extremely helpful. Then what happened? 1 a.m. on May 7th, Patients Like Me, the system admins, noticed some suspicious activity on their mood discussion board, which is for it was for emotional disorders and bipolar disease, where they would put highly personal information, they would share. And there was this back and forth. They were able to communicate with each other, and they noticed that there was a new member that was using some software to copy every single message that ever was on that public board. Now, you have to have an account. It's a free account. You register for an account, and then you can read the messages, post the messages. So there was this new member who had created a user ID and password, and then was using that user ID and password to use software to suck or copy all those messages. The sysadmins did what any good sysadmin does, is they locked the account that was scraping the data. The next morning, the holder of that account emails customer support saying he can't log in. The password wasn't working. By afternoon, they found 3 other accounts that were doing the same thing to other forms for other diseases, and they shut them down. At that point, the investigators, the security folks at Patients Like Me, traced those accounts based on IP address to Nielsen Buzzmetrics, which is a company, a subsidiary of Nielsen, and Nielsen is the large company that does TV and radio ratings. By May 18th, 10 days later, they sent a cease and desist letter because they were able to prove that it was Nielsen that was doing it. By the 28th, Nielsen then sent a letter back to Patients Like Me agreeing that they will stop scraping the data. At that point, Patients Like Me sends a notification of the incident to all its members. Obviously very disconcerting. All your personal information was now taken by a marketing firm. Nielsen was not able to undo the data because they couldn't track what data they got from where, but it was just going forward, they wouldn't do it again. Then the next day, Patients Like Me sent out a reminder to all its members. And here's what it says. And take a moment to read it. Let's read this. This is the actual text from the actual email that they sent out to all the people that were signed up. We take the information of patients like you, share about your experience with the disease and sell it to our partners, i.e. companies that are developing or selling similar products to patients. These products may include drugs, devices, equipment, insurance, and medical services. You should expect that every piece of information you submit, even if it is not currently displayed, may be shared. Now, if you are a patient and you received this email and you had just shared some very personal information, how do you think that would make you feel? So, now, when you register for a site that is free or supposedly free, and you're going to be providing personal information, just think of Patients Like Me. Okay, and what we see here is really just the beginning. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to commercial surveillance. So, you put data on social networks. Just know it is permanently shared. You can delete it yourself, but it is not deleted. And we will get back to that. We will address these different topics and these, more subtlety in there. So what will companies do to monetize all this data that they collect? They, of course, use it to target you with advertisements. This is, I think, a well-known thing. But that, this way they can focus those advertisements perfectly, to their target market. To you, your social profile on your social media is your data. You look at it as your own. But to those social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, whoever it is, your data is equal to money. It's actually worth a lot to them, and we will see that as well. So let's take a look at Facebook. Right, they have 1.49 billion, and that's B with a B, billion with a B, active users monthly, 968 million active daily users. The average number of Facebook friends for U.S. females is 250. The average time spent per day for these active users, the daily active user, is 20 minutes or above. The amount of user data stored as of 10/25 was actually 300 petabytes. It's not gigabytes, not terabytes, petabytes. A petabyte is 1,000 terabytes. So it's hard to comprehend exactly how much that is actually. Tremendous amount of data. So what does Mark Zuckerberg think of users uh, and their data and sharing that data? So he started this at Harvard early on, and he was not so he wasn't so polished in the way he described it. So this is actually text messages that have been collected. This is actually his account. So he says, yeah, if you ever need info about anyone at Harvard, just ask. I have over 4,000 emails, pictures, addresses, SMS. I'm not sure what that is. And so the friend says, what? How do you manage that one to collect all that data? People just submitted it. I don't know why. They trust me. Yeah. That is the way he looked at the people who are using, it was called the Facebook, I think, originally. And this is before he commercialized it, before he opened it up to the public. It was just within the servers in the university. But this is what his attitude. They're stupid. They're stupid. They trust me. I don't know why, but they do. And they are dumb. So that was his attitude then. So what does he say about it now? Truth is, he doesn't think anything different. He just has a nicer way of saying it. And this is an actual quote. People have really gotten comfortable not only sharing more information with more people, he said. That social norm is something that has just evolved over time. In other words, we open up our lives to the public. There's no such thing as, privacy or sneas or, keeping private things private. No, everyone can see anything, and that's what it has become, and that's what he's saying, and that's really the truth. Whether we realize it or not, we're sharing the data with absolutely everybody and anybody. So what about privacy settings? So the truth is, this is from the New York Times, and they took a look at Facebook privacy and to see, well, they put in all kinds of additional privacy settings so that I can restrict who can see what. So to manage your privacy on Facebook, you'll need to navigate through 50 settings with more than 170 options. I don't know if you multiply 170 times 50 to really come out and exactly how many settings you have to know about and know how to manipulate, but Facebook says it wants to offer precise controls over sharing on the internet, and that's why they're so complex. Well, they're so complex that no one can figure it out, and some are contradictory in which one overlaps which and which one overrides which. That's a mass confusion if you take a look at it. And that's what someone actually went and created this image to map it out. And I think all the brown ones are additional options within the light blue square, the white and blue square, which is a subcategory of a dark blue square. So it gets, and again, this is also taken from the New York Times. So how much value do the users have actually to Facebook? Revenue per user, $141. And this is 2014. I don't have the more current data. Friendships, every friendship, the connections that they know who you're connected to, 62 cents. Total profile, could be up to $1,800. So why? Would anyone pay $140 to use Facebook? Because essentially that's what you're doing. You're giving them your data, which is worth approximately a little bit over $140. So would you give that away just to use Facebook so that you can just update it and let the world see what you're doing at the moment? So you have people that say, well, I never post anything to Facebook. I have to have an account because I want to see my grandchildren's latest photos. And this is just an example that I took. Okay. So there's a lot of covert surveillance, Facebook, right? Even on non-Facebook websites. So there are many there are many tricks that the company has used to pull additional data through third-party app developers. And this means that if you have a non-Facebook page, a website, and it says like us on Facebook, if you're logged into Facebook and you come to a website that has that button, even if you don't click on it, it already captures information that you went to that website. So if you log into a profile on that website, they may be capturing some of that data. You can look up Chris Sogian, and I think he has some presentations on YouTube, and you can see exactly how that works, and I think he demonstrates it to prove that this is the case. How about Google? They also have a thing called an account dashboard with all the various products. I mean, how many here have a Gmail account? Okay. Has anyone ever used Google Maps? Maybe on their iPhone or Android? Okay. So we'll take a look at that and see how they're really all connected so that Google can build an image of your behavior. So it gives you a privacy dashboard just to show how much it knows about you. That may not be their intent, but that's, it's pretty revealing. Wow, they know a lot. They pulled all that information together from various different places. So in my opinion, there's no company that is as invasive as Google. At least that's what I think. So if you use Google Voice, well, it records your voice calls. It analyzes your email if you use Gmail. It knows who you talk to and where you are based on Android. It has all your documents if you use Google Docs, Google Drive. Now, just a step back, Android, just that you should know, when they were building profiles of people, they were missing a certain piece of information that was exceedingly valuable to them. And they looked for a strategy to how can we get that information from people willingly. And that information was location data. Where are you located? They had no way of really tracking that. So they actually built Android for phones. They give it out for free with the intent is that hidden somewhere in the terms and conditions, they can pull back that data and they can track your location. So that's what I'm talking about over there with Android. So you have Robert David Steele from it says the CIA disclosed that Google actually takes money from the U.S. intelligence community. So there are times where Google actually knows more information than the federal government. They can't track U.S. citizens. They're not allowed to. But through a third-party doctrine, if you give the information to someone else and it's available to be sold, well, the government can buy it. So one of the latest things is, it was a couple of weeks ago, a news item that Google is signed a partnership agreement with Dexcom to develop CGM. CGM is continuous glucose monitor. It's generally used by diabetics, and it gives them a running tally of what their glucose levels are. This is exceedingly important for type 1 diabetics, children. If they eat too much sugar, well, someone has to increase their insulin dose. So it gives a running tally. Every couple of minutes, it actually looks without having to prick their finger and take a blood test. They wear a sensor, and it sends information, and their parents, doctor, nurse, whatever, can actually receive it via an email, text, their sugar levels. and then they can call into the school if they're in school and say, hey, my kid has high sugar. Can you increase the dose on his insulin pump or give him an injection? So it's actually a phenomenal piece of equipment. But Google is now joining together with them to develop the next generation CGM. So they're getting into the healthcare business. They want to know your health. They want to know, right? So it becomes, and that's why I'm saying they're extremely invasive. They want to know absolutely everything. They actually just bought a company, and I can't recall the name off the top of my head, that sells, I think it's called Nest, and they sell internet-enabled devices for your home, whether it's lights, thermostats, all that kind of equipment. So now they'll know actually how do you live your life inside your house as well. Okay, so who uses an Android-based cell phone? Okay, the voice control features, such as allows Google to store voice recordings. Okay, so it can, and not only that, it can be replayed from Google's voice and audio activity page. So you can see what you've said to your phone and then hear it back. They offer location history. And you can actually log in and see where you've been. So by using an Android phone, they can actually map that data and show it back to you. And here it is. You can see every restaurant this fellow traveled to. You can see where he went to throughout the day, stop by stop, his passageways. He was sitting in a car and went across the bridge and came back, or maybe it was in a subway at that point. But you could see his travels throughout the day. If this doesn't frighten you, I don't know what does, because you gave this information to a company based on third-party doctrine, while the government can now go and purchase it. No warrant, no oversight. They can purchase it. That's all there's to it. One of the key takeaways from this particular slide is it's not only the government through third party that can purchase this data and view it without a warrant, but what other companies, what other organizations, what private industry can purchase this information and use it to track and to market and to create profiles of your behavior and your travels, where you're stopping, who you're meeting, things like that. So it becomes quite invasive. Okay, what about free Android and iOS applications? You download an app. It's a free app. So about researchers downloaded and analyzed 110 free apps to see what kind of information is leaking, is it allowing to leak to other organizations. So 73% of Android applications, these free apps, shared information such as email address to third parties. 47% to a mysterious domain. Now, we don't know. According to the researchers, they were not able to conclude what this safemovedm.com domain actually is, but it connected to that domain and provided information. If you look at the source, I included the source on this slide. You can download the research paper that was written. It's rather lengthy, but it actually gives details of how this was done and what they were able to find on this information. So again, free apps, They're free for a reason. They're collecting your data, sharing your data, and that's the way they pay for the app. The bottom line, a significant portion of apps will share data from the user, and that may include your inputs. You put in information into the app, it may share that information with third parties without it requiring you to be notified. So the app itself does not notify you that it's sharing your data with third parties. You may think that, oh, I'm putting it into this app is useful to me. It's actually sharing that data to other organizations. Next is terms of service and privacy policies. One of the ways that prevent you from going after some of these companies for sharing data without you knowing about it is that they put it in the terms of service, and everyone has to agree to it before they can actually download it or use the app. But what they do is they do a little trick here. Sure, they give you all the information. You can read it. You can look at it. You can agree to it if you want to use the app or application or website. But they basically make it impossible for you to actually read and understand the terms and conditions. Just an example. Facebook, it's over 9,300 words, which is longer than the U.S. Constitution. Okay, who studied the Constitution in high school? Okay, basically everyone. Who actually read it, the entire thing from end to end? Basically nobody. The reason is we read bits and pieces in school, and yeah, it's hard to understand. Who would have an interest in actually reading the whole thing from beginning to end? Basically nobody. So they make it that long, sort of to make sure that you don't read it. PayPal, that sort of takes the cake. 36,275 words. iPhone, 21,586. iTunes, this is just the iTunes, 19,972. Then one of the clauses, they say it can be changed at any time. So you agreed to it today, they can change it tomorrow. And if you do actually read through it, it's there to protect the provider. It's not there to protect you. There was a London Wi-Fi experiment. What this was a case where they set up a Wi-Fi router in a neighborhood in London, and part of the terms and conditions when you signed on and you saw, hey, there's free Wi-Fi here. In the terms and conditions, you agreed to give away your firstborn child to them, and that they can come and take him at any time. They had people that they turn on their laptop, their iPhones, Androids, whatever it was. They want to connect to the internet. They see, oh, there's Wi-Fi available. Well, the first page that comes up is terms and conditions. Free Wi-Fi? Accept the terms and conditions. Basically, everyone accepted the terms and conditions without reading that they're actually giving away their firstborn child. They also then did the experiment with a little different twist where they had it unencrypted so that many of the passwords that people set up were able to be read, and no one checked to see if there was any security on it. Just goes to show that people will do almost anything for free Wi-Fi. Ever see this yellow box come up when you go into one of the websites that you use? We're changing our policy and terms and conditions. This stuff matters. Learn more, dismiss. How many people actually click on learn more to see what was being changed? I know I myself usually just click dismiss. So do most other people. So if you actually read the Google terms of service, here are some of the key points. They can keep all your searches. You go into Google, you do a search, they store that information. they connect it to your profile, so they know what you're searching for, what you're likely to search for. They don't give a time period that they're going to actually delete it. They can use your content, existing and future services. It allows the service to track you on other websites. And this is all in the terms of service. You can go in and look at it. They can share your personal information with other parties, so they do have the ability to sell it. You're agreeing to allow them to sell it, and they can stop providing the service to you at any time. Then, here's a really interesting one. They take license rights. When you upload information, you're giving Google a worldwide license to use, modify, distribute what you uploaded. So anyone use Google Drive? Well, theoretically, they own that information. Any document that you put up there, that's it. It's theirs. Even derivative works, they're allowed to take ownership of. They can distribute it, they can modify it, they can use it, and they don't owe you anything. If you wrote a book, well, guess what? They can publish it and charge money for it and not give you a cent. YouTube. Terms may be changed at any time, their discretion, no notice to user necessary. They can remove your content without any notice. So if you're using it for storage, well, beware, they can delete it. They own the copyright license is broader than what is necessary. In other words, they're trying to do it in such a way that they essentially own the copyright. And you have think of this. A college student, he gets drunk, puts some stupid video of himself on YouTube, grows up and says, wait a second, not the best thing for my prospective employer to see. Goes in and deletes it. Well, guess what? It's not really deleted. They still have a copy, and they do not delete it. LinkedIn. This was just too good to skip, so I had to put it in the slide. Let me just read it. You grant LinkedIn non-exclusive, irrevocable, worldwide, perpetual, unlimited, assignable, sub-licensable, fully paid up, and royalty-free rights to us, which is LinkedIn, to copy, prepare derivative works of, improve, distribute, publish, remove, retain, add, process, analyze, use, and commercialize. Basically, they own your data. They own your profile. They own your picture. They own absolutely every single post, connection, or anything else you put on your LinkedIn. Twitter. Our services are primarily designed to help you share information with the world. Most of the information you provide us is information you are asking us to make public. Your public information is broadly and instantly disseminated. Once it's out there, it's public. At least they're being honest, straightforward, and it's not too complicated. So, what is Twitter's definition of public information? The messages you tweet, the metadata provided with the tweets, the lists you create, the people that you follow, the tweets that you mark as favorites or retweet, and many other bits of information. Tweets are searchable by many search engines and delivered via SMS and APIs to a wide range of users and services. This is all within Twitter's terms and conditions so that it's clear what they consider public information that they are going to disseminate, like in the previous slide they mentioned, to anybody and everybody they please. It's not just the message that you tweet, but as you can see, it's a lot more. It's those lists, who you follow, and essentially, again, it allows them to create a more complete profile of who's using Twitter, what are their likes, what are their interests. It sort of allows them to define who you are. non-identifiable information. Many websites claim that they only collect non-identifiable. But what is that? What is non-identifiable? So they're not going to collect my name. Will they collect my zip code, my income level, so they can see, well, people at this income level are are interested in these topics or something like that? Is it really non-identifiable? What is that definition? How many pieces of information are required to identify me as unique? For example, if you don't know my name, but you know my birth date, does that mean that I can be uniquely identified based on my birthday? Well, no. There's many other people that may have been born on that day. How about if we join gender plus birth date? Well, that narrows it because it's only going to be males that are born on that day, but still, it's not uniquely identifiable. That means I just narrowed it down. But what happens if we start throwing other things in the mix? I drive a Corolla, Toyota Corolla, or I drive a Jaguar, or I live in a particular zip code. So now we start pulling together information that is making me unique, even without the name. So here, researchers actually created, I forgot which university, Harvard University, actually created this website to show how unique we are based on date of birth, gender, and zip code that we live in. Let me give you a little demo over here. Just watch, based on these three pieces of information, how many people live in the zip code that I live in. Okay, it's not working. Let me try this again. Let's see. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're going to take the year, November 11th, 1969, male, 21215. So, take a look at it. Within the range of 1969 to 1973, there are many people, close to 1,678 people that live in the 21215 zip code. That zip code has, according to the census, has 60,161 people living in it. For the specific birth year, 1969, 335 people live in that zip code. On November 11th, 1969, male in that zip code, 1. So there, with information that the companies claim is non-identifiable, it just shows that you can uniquely identify an individual based on these three pieces of data. Here's another interesting website, pq.com. They sell information. That is what they do. With just three pieces of information, you put in your first name, your last name, and your location. And you do a search. I put my first name, last name, my location in. It even found who my brother's name, my brother-in-law's name, my sister's, their married names, their ages, my parents. My brother hasn't lived in the United States for over 20 years. He doesn't have a Facebook account. He doesn't even have an email address that I'm aware of. I have no idea where they found this information and how they connected me to that information. It's just amazing. PQ.com, try it out. And that's for a free profile. They could find that information. You pay something like $19.95 or $12.95, and there's even, they'll give you their full profile, what they can find on you. They found user IDs for websites that I didn't log in. I don't even know what they're for. I know that they're mine based on the user ID, but I know I haven't used it in 15 years. So it's pretty amazing what kind of information they actually find. Again, this is information that we give them. Okay, what can be done with all this information? Who uses it? Well, terrorists have actually used it. Think of this: there's the attack that was in Mumbai. The terrorists come into room 632, and there's a fellow by the name of Ramamurthy who's in the room. So the terrorist says, "Who are you?" So he says, "I'm an innocent school teacher." The terrorist picks up his cell phone. It's actually a BlackBerry, and makes a call. So on the phone, they ask, "Okay, is your hostage, is he heavyset?" "Yes." "Bald in front?" "Yes." "Does he wear glasses?" "Yes." "Kill him." Right? Essentially, he was a banker. He was chairman of ING, Visya, which is an investment bank. Where did they get that information? At what point? The fellow on the phone says, "Hold on a minute." They basically looked up his profile and, looked for Twitter accounts, LinkedIn, etc., found his profile, and they say, "Oh, this guy, he's a high-profile person." And that's why they wanted him killed. So our information that we put out there may be used in ways we would never expect. He actually survived. But this just goes to show that, marketing firms are not the only ones using the data. Just like it's available to marketing firms, it may be available to organizations that we would prefer that our information not be available to them. Internet of Things. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this a little bit. We'll only touch on it. Internet of Things really means all those other items, not just our laptops and cell phones, that are connected to the internet. For example, nanny cams. Anyone know what a nanny cam is? Okay. A nanny cam is where I'm going to have a babysitter at home taking care of a child. I want to be able to monitor what's going on in the house. What is that babysitter actually doing with my kids? So you set up a camera, and I can log in from work, see what's going on in my house. Thermostats. I own a house, let's say in Florida or up in New York, a vacation home. I rent it out. I want to make sure that they are not leaving the heat at 90 degrees when they're at work, because I'm going to be paying for the rent. They pay for the rent. I pay for the heat. So over the internet, I could control the temperature. I could control the lights. I could control many things in the house. So perhaps even the locks. So that's what the Internet of Things, all these different devices, how do I explain it? Non-computer devices that suddenly are connected and controlled by the internet. So think of this. Refrigerators, if you open up the door, put in a container of milk, it can detect, a barcode. It knows when that milk is going to expire. We can automatically either email you or text you a reminder that you need milk today, or other groceries based on what's in and out of your refrigerator. Cars communicate to each other. It'll alarm you if you're too close to another car. Wearable devices, continuous glucose monitors, blood pressure monitors, exercise monitors, all those, and they get uploaded to the cloud, so to speak. Think of this, if it checks your blood pressure, sees your blood pressure is high, well, your doctor can get an alert. What's the bad? Passive phone tracking. We covered that with the Android. Show facial recognition. You take a picture with your camera. Now all of a sudden it knows who you are associating with, makes those connections. You walk into a store, well, it can track via Bluetooth or phone signal what products are you looking at, what stores were you in, what time of day, was it during work time, license plate readers, vehicle trackers, and there's many other potential things. There's one insurance company that requires you to install a small device, and it detects what speed you drive at, how many times did you brake, how hard did you brake, right? So this way they can determine your driving patterns and what's your risk level. If you're increased risk, well, your premium may go up. If you're a low risk, you drive slowly and carefully, right? They don't see that you're suddenly stopping or driving above 80 miles an hour. Well, you get a reduction in cost. So on one hand, is that a good thing? Probably, because if I'm a careful driver, why should I pay more for insurance? On the other, who are they selling that data to? And what are they doing with all that data? So what can you do? Number one, log out of social networks when browsing and clear cookies. So, for example, if I'm logged into Google, well, I never logged out. And I go to other websites, now they can track what other websites I'm viewing. Clear tracking cookies, use a disposable email address or fake names for social networks and some of the other websites that you need to log into. Block JavaScript and use private browsing. Both Chrome and Firefox, I know, have a private browsing mode that prevents that any information from being passed from one browser session to another. So that's also quite useful. There's a number of other products that are useful as well. Okay, wait. Another safety feature, safety practice is to use a single credit card for online purchases. What this allows you to do is to easily look at a credit card statement and see if anything that you don't recognize was billed, and this way you know that this is used for all online purchases. Any offline purchase that shows up in that bill, suddenly you know that someone stole that credit card and is using it unauthorized. You receive an email requesting that you log in, a login. You need to reset your password. Don't. Banks don't request that in an email. If there's a link, go to your browser, type in your bank's URL. Don't click on emails. Another thing is, when you see a URL, wherever you can, use HTTPS, because then it's encrypted. Reset passwords, and online scams, phishing emails, report them to your provider. Here's a couple of products that are add-ons. AdBlock. This is just a help because it prevents some of those ads from showing up. Ghostery is great. It's an absolutely phenomenal plugin. For Firefox, I don't know if they have one available for Chrome. It blocks most of the trackers. So many times within a website, there's going to be third-party trackers. There was one website, I think it was weather.com, had close to 70 trackers embedded on the website. So this will actually block all those. Disconnect Me is a website that's useful. However, many business organizations, if you're using the internet there, they will not allow you to disconnect me. That's because of the way it works with bypassing proxies and various different other technical details that I'm not going to get into. Questions? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate you listening to what I had to say tonight. Thank you.